Everyone can hear me? Thumbs up. Okay, cool. This is a little bit unique because I'm talking to a couple people here in the audience and also talking to a few of you on. I'm talking. You actually can't see this. The room is full. We got a full.
That's right. We got a full room.
Full room over here. It's Wendy and Caitlin. So thank you, Wendy and Caitlin, for inviting me to come out. I have spoken to this group for the last several years as you prepare for this innovation challenge. And a little bit just really quickly about me, since this is mostly about you. I'm a CPA. I work primarily with small businesses, small mostly being from an ownership standpoint. So it could be $100 million business that's owned by one or two people. And that's really my comfort zone or preference rather, because you can control a lot more, you can make decisions a lot faster. You only have to look at one or two people or 5 people as opposed to 1,000 shareholders that have to go to boards of directors and committees and things like that. And so because of that, I really have found, and I have a passion for helping out entrepreneurs and startups. And I primarily work in the tax and accounting realm, although my firm that I work with, we handle everything from audits to other types of consulting and procedures, M&A activities, things like that. So I have a slide presentation that I will flip through if no one talks and asks any questions or points me in the right direction, but I'm here mostly to be able to help you all out. And so my preference is that this is more of a conversation. I realize it's a little bit slightly more difficult just given the the Zoom environment and everything, but you've all been very experienced with that the last year and a half. So I'm hopeful that we can still have an engaging conversation. So as I do in person, I'd like to at least, maybe if it's okay, start off by having a brief introduction of who these people are, of who all you are, and maybe your name, although I can see it, but your name, a little bit about your business, or whatever you'd like to share about your business. And that'll at least give you some context in terms of trying to tailor some of what I'm going to be talking about, which is going to be more on the business accounting and finance side of things, to what's actually going to be applicable to you. So whoever wants to start first.
Hold on one second.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no. So in order to do that, guys, I'm going to unmute my computer, which means we 3 here have to not talk or else it'll echo. So I'll type to you if anything, but I'm going to unmute and the sound will come from my computer. Thank you for this, yeah. Calling you out.
She said Allison. Sorry, I muted this.
Oh, okay. So my name's Allison Pena. I'm a senior majoring in commercial entrepreneurship. I'm working on 2 companies, but the one I plan on doing for the innovation challenge is a sustainable kind of therapeutic notebook company. It would be an e-commerce website, so I'm kind of interested in learning more about how to set up a cost structure for an e-commerce website. I really don't know a lot about how to pick an appropriate shipping model, I guess. I don't know how to really word that, but yeah, that's what I'm working on.
Well, hi, my name is Mariana. I'm a junior majoring in commercial entrepreneurship, and right now I am working with 2 business partners in creating a multifunctional, aesthetically pleasing and cost-effective brand of bags that have a secret compartment for alcohol flasks. So yeah, that's it.
Okay.
So Jolene, you want to go next?
Oh, yes. Hi, can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, you can? Oh, I'm working on a baby product company. I'm developing an invention right now to sell as a good. And yeah, that's what it is. Thank you. No problem.
Okay, introductions out of the way. Okay, so this is going to be somewhat difficult.
I'm so sorry. Oh, you have to touch into the screen again. Make it click, because right now you're on the Zoom,
Oh,
the mouse.
there we go. Okay.
Weird.
So what I'm going to start with, and this is going to be a little bit difficult because you can only see half the screen. So this is going to be mostly me talking. So let me make it so that I can really see the
Is the
screen.
screen being shared? I mean, they may be able to see.
Oh, can you all, can one of you, can she unmute? Can they see the entire screen? Maybe that would be helpful.
Yeah, ask them to put their thumbs up
Can-
if they can see the whole,
can
the
you
whole
s-
PowerPoint.
Can you see the entire PowerPoint? Not just like my image?
Yes, so.
Okay, so I think that was a yes. Okay, so that's good. I was thinking something different. Okay, so I'm going to start.
Classroom support tried to call me back and it kept messing this up.
Okay, so in general, I'm trying to hide this thing. I'm sorry. In general, when you all are thinking about the building your presentations, and when again is the presentation? When is the first round of presentations? When you?
The semifinals are February 4th.
Okay, so as we all know, the next month and a half are going to fly by, and then it'll be the beginning of next year, and then all of a sudden you're going to be in this first round of presentations. And a lot of what you all mentioned, even so far on the call in the introductions, that's going to be a substantial portion of your overall presentation and pitch. But there is a large area of meaningfulness that is in business when it comes to the actual underlying drivers of success or failure in terms of how you make money, how you spend money, how you're profitable, whether you're a for-profit company or even if you're a nonprofit organization. The goal is to still make money. And you as the business owners, you as the founders of this organization, of this company, I noticed a couple of you, I believe, or at least one of you mentioned that this is just one of the organizations or one of the companies that you're a part of. So a lot of these kind of thoughts are relevant not just to the business that you're entering into the innovation challenge with, but also businesses in general. I will try to stick in general to some themes, and then we can dive into specific scenarios if as it's appropriate. And if you have any questions, I think for the two of you that are on video, if you could just like physically wave me down, I'll stop and we can do that. Or if you want to enter into the chat, Caitlin's over here monitoring that and she'll get me this, make sure we address any questions. But the first thing we're going to talk about is the revenue side. So this is how your business is going to make money in general. And I'm going to be tailoring a lot of this conversation to the actual challenge itself, and I'll try to sprinkle in some real world examples and thoughts beyond just what you're going to be including in your presentation. So when you think of how you're going to make money, you want to think about, and all three of you, it seems like, have customers that you're going to be selling some product to, whether it's a baby product, whether it's a bag, or whether it's a what was the first one? Gosh.
Journal.
Yeah, that's right. The journal. Yeah. It's all things that you are going to be selling to customers. And so in terms of how you value each different revenue stream, you're going to want to think about not only what the market price out there is for it, because some of these things might be innovative and there might not necessarily be as much of an industry for it. But what value do your customers have to whatever product or benefit that you're providing? That is something you can get from comparative analysis. If you want to look at other similar types of companies out there that sell similar products or similar services, or it could be from, in general, getting some kind of a sense from a survey or assessment of peers, or some kind of a polling to determine kind of what your parameters are from a price standpoint. But overall, your price and your revenue is going to be driven by what value you provide to the end customer that you have. So again, price based on value, not necessarily based on cost. You'll notice that, or you'll be able to recognize that a lot of companies that have tons of investment in their actual infrastructure and products, and someone mentioned, Jolene mentioned even inventing something. Inventing something is, or having those types of development costs, most businesses do have a substantial amount of investment at the very beginning. Everyone here has some kind of a major investment, comparatively major investment in getting your company off the ground compared to what you're actually bringing in revenue right now. But nonetheless, you're going to want to make sure that you price and you value your revenue stream based on the value that you're providing to the customer, not necessarily what your cost is. If you lead with pricing based on cost, it's going to not end as productive of a conversation, especially more in a pitch, compared to if you were to go based on value. So you're going to want to make sure you keep that in mind. It's not as, now cost is relevant because that determines your profitability, which determines the value and direction of your business, but the actual revenue generation, how you're planning on scaling your sales, really is going to be based on ultimately the value per item that you choose to set. We do have some different types of revenues, and for some of these companies, you might have multiple types of revenues where you'll have a one-time payment. Someone buys a bag, someone pays for one of the baby products. That's going to be a one-time payment. And then if you have others that have more recurring payments, so customer support, ongoing payments, you might have some, and then you could even have a model where you do a combination of the both, where you have one-time product costs, and then you also have, or in revenues to your company, and you also have recurring payments where maybe it's newsletters, or maybe it's other types of subscriptions. And so it's okay to have multiple different types of revenues, even if you do have just the sale of a product. Make sure that you've broken that out and can elaborate that during any kind of a presentation or Q&A when you're getting ready for this challenge. Ways to generate revenue. This is a little bit similar to what we were just talking about. You can have obviously the sale of physical assets. You could have fees based on not just the sale of an item or the availability of an item, but actually by the usage. So if someone actually pays for, again, cell phones and hotels are examples, you don't pay for it unless you use it. There are other types of revenue models that you see here where they're based on subscriptions, renting or leasing, licensing, brokerage, and advertising. These are all different kinds of models in which companies generate revenue, even if their baseline service is just to sell physical goods. A lot of them have combinations where they might sell physical goods, but they incorporate other models, subscription models, insurance models, like with the automobiles. And so you do want to take a step back as you're workshopping some of these, what your business, each of your businesses can entail, whether they're website, e-commerce driven, or whether they are just a sale of a product. You're going to want to really think about the different ways that you can stack on revenue models on top of what your base business is, if it makes sense. And that will just, again, allow you to extrapolate what kind of revenue prediction that you can have in the future, which will just make your presentation, if it's reasonable, it'll make your presentation seem a lot more realistic and well thought through. We've kind of touched on this a little bit, but pricing is, so a revenue stream is a strategy used to generate money coming in the door, but how you price that is intentional. It's not, your cost is what it ultimately ends up costing, but your pricing is something that is intentional from free up to, an amount that you think will be attractive to a customer. And free is okay if it's intentional. I think I mentioned that at some point, where even in any of the revenue models, free is often not uncommon, where you see someone provide a service or provide a service for, or a product for free for a period of time. I actually was just talking today with a client whose company that is doing really well. One of the reasons they were able to get into some of these larger segments with their customers is because they actually had the financial backing where they could provide a certain segment of their services free for a period of time. So a free trial period, they got a lot of people to sign up for it. Not everyone did, but it allowed some people to try it out. They loved it, and then they were more on board to go with the set prices that this client particularly provided. So pricing is a tactic. If it is free for a period of time, know what that period is, know why you're doing it, and know what that evolution will transition into from an overall pricing standpoint. I want to next talk about, again, if you have any questions or if we want to dive into anything, would you have questions?
No,
Okay.
sorry,
If you have any questions or want to dive into any specifics about your company that you're willing to kind of talk through, please let me know. But next, I'm going to move over to some of the costs as just thinking about your business and how much your product is going to be priced for and what you think you can realistically sell it for. And then how that scales up over 6 months, a year, or 2 years is one item. And right in connection with that is how you're going to be carrying your costs. What the costs are to get to that point where you're ready to sell, what the costs are to kind of keep the ship running, and what the costs are to actually sell and make and sell the particular product that your business is based on. So in that description, I kind of touched on a few of these things. You've probably heard of these before, but you are going to have different costs in connection with your business. You're going to have some costs that are fixed that don't vary based on how much you sell, such as rent. If you're renting a facility that you're making your product out of, or some of you, if you're renting even just an office space, or if you're buying a laptop for your business, that's a fixed cost where it is the cost that you've incurred regardless of whether you sell one product or one subscription or whether you sell 100 or 1,000. It's in general, it's fixed. Variable costs are what they sound like. They're going to vary depending on how much of the products that you sell. So for the e-commerce websites, and really actually all of these companies so far, it's going to be based on the cost of selling your products. That's going to be your most predictable variable cost. And so you're going to want to think about, and we're going to touch on it in a little bit, but you're going to want to think about how much it costs to buy your products, how much it costs to make them, how much it costs to ship them out. And then that is going to be what you're going to bake into your financials in your presentation to be able to defend really your financial projections that you're going to be discussing within the InNOLEvation challenge. And you can go in as deep of detail or as light of detail as you want to, but if you go into a little bit of detail, or if you just skim the surface of the financials, I can guarantee you it's going to be a question that comes up in the presentation after you're done. The judges and the people that are kind of helping you workshop this presentation, they're going to want to know more details about the financial structure, how you're going to be making your money, how you're going to be spending your money and on what, and how that is going to be predicted in the future. So you're going to want to be able to think about all of these costs, all of these items that make up various forms of revenue, and all of the elements of what you're going to be spending your money on. So it might be obvious to think about the variable costs, how much it costs to make and then ship your products. It might be obvious to think about even some of the fixed costs, like where you're going to store stuff or what equipment do you need. But you're also going to want to think about your other operational costs beyond just the immediate fixed and the immediate kind of cost of goods sold. So do you have any other payroll costs. You're definitely going to have payroll taxes. You're definitely going to have potentially payroll to at least yourself, which you're going to want to bake in as an assumption. There's no point in having a business if it's profitable, but it's because you're not paying yourself. That doesn't really make all that much sense. You're going to want to ensure that you factor in not just the immediate payroll costs to start, but the payroll costs to expand as you scale your revenue up. You're going to want to make sure you have the proportionate amount of kind of people power behind it. That's going to be different depending on which business model we're looking at it. For the e-commerce site, it's going to be a little bit different from a people power necessary than maybe one of the then maybe something where you're actually making actual products, sewing products together, like with the bags. You're gonna have a completely different set of kind of percentages there in terms of how much payroll makes up all of your costs compared to some of the others. You're going to want to also think about, this is going to be a little bit different, but what are the risks and what are the unknowns? You're going to want to think about in that industry, what are the different costs that are out there as you expand. We have a question? Okay.
Yes.
What is that?
Let me unmute. So hold on one second, Allison. Okay.
Okay, so you mentioned, it's not worth having a business if it's profitable because you also have to pay yourself too. I'm not sure if there's an answer for this or if it just really depends on the person and their lifestyle, but do you know what's like a reasonable salary to give yourself for like a startup company?
Sure. Good timing. That is a good question, and I can elaborate on that a little bit more. And I was being somewhat half joking in my initial comment. I'll try to say it a little bit more constructively. If you're trying to pitch a business to someone, pitch investing in a business to someone, and you are displaying your financials and you are showing the amount of money that it can bring in and the cost that it takes to bring in that money. And then the profit is displayed, the actual benefits of the overall production of the company is displayed. But if you're not displaying all of the sweat costs that you're putting into the company, you could argue that those are essentially misleading financials. There's misleading projections because you're doing all this you're doing all of this effort for no compensation. And no one I know, unless they're the owners of the company, and many owners of companies do forego compensation, actual compensation, but it's because they're building something. But when they're trying to provide projections to investors and that display realistic financials, I would want to see some kind of if you're providing services. Now, if you're creating a company and then letting someone else run it and you're baking in that management cost into the financials, that's a completely different story, because you're just sitting there potentially just collecting profits off of the operations of a company that you're not providing any services for. But if you actually are the one doing everything and you're wanting to show financials that you can then scale, you're going to want to factor in owner compensation for the services that you provide. And so when it comes to what's reasonable, I would start with the other elements of the financial kind of model, the revenue and the expenses, because the answer might be, and remember when I mentioned free is okay, if you can defend why it's free and you have parameters on that, it very well could be that your compensation is set at 0 for the first 6 months, for the first year. But then as you're ramping up and you have profits, your compensation should reflect that accordingly. It doesn't make any sense also to have a financial presentation where you have $10,000 in income, $8,000 in other expenses, and then $50,000 of owner compensation, because that doesn't make any sense either. You're driving your company into the ground by paying you. So owner compensation is going to be somewhat vague, and then it's going to be based on the reasonable compensation that the company can pay out given its profitability at the time. There are many times where owner compensation might be zero for a period of time, might be receiving compensation for another period of time. And then if certain unknowns occur and the owners decide that they need to halt compensation to themselves for a moment to allow for the business to kind of regroup and collect itself, that is again an okay occurrence to have, as long as you can defend why it's happening. So I would say, in terms of what's reasonable, I would let the profitability help you arrive at what that reasonable number is. If you're seeing, when you're kind of mapping this out and looking at, okay, if I start with this level of revenue based on this many number of subscriptions or products sold, and I know what my estimated costs are, and if you're starting to see that you're in your projections at a certain point in time, you're starting to make profits, I would then add in a line item there and have owner compensation. Again, if you're providing services still, which I imagine you will be, have owner compensation in there as well. That will be that will not only be more realistic to investors, but also it'll be more realistic to lenders as well, who, if at any point in time you're going to be pursuing financing, not only are they going to look for you to guarantee along with the company some kind of financing, and by guarantee I mean be on the hook as well. They're also going to want to make sure that the business that they're lending out to is not misleadingly having lower expenses, so therefore higher profitability by not having the owner take out a salary. So I would let the profitability projections help drive what that reasonableness benchmark is. But ultimately, if you're noticing that you're profitable based on your projections, I would at least ensure that within your payroll costs, you have some compensation for you as the owner as well. Did that help at least lean in the direction of an answer?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so now let's move on. Okay, so all stages incur. I think we talked about this a little bit as well. All stages incur costs, the delivering and the creating of value, the customer relations, and even obviously generating the revenue. We talked about that when it comes to what do you think your overall investment in the company is prior to actually going live and selling products. What do you think your startup costs are going to be? What about the ongoing customer relations and support? Because building up a company, whether it's something you sell completely online or whether it's products that you sell by going out there and marketing to people in stores or in places of congregation, it's still going to be something that is going to cost money. And again, if you're looking at scalability, if you're providing that sweat equity by you're the one going out there and not taking a salary or an hourly pay to go try to sell some of your goods, if you're trying to scale that approach by having multiple people in multiple locations, you're not going to just replicate the cost it costs for you to do it because you're not paying yourself. You're going to want to make sure, this goes back to the having realistic financials, you're going to want to make sure that you include the cost of really think about if you weren't there, you'd have to be paying someone to do something. What would that cost look like? And make sure that you are capturing not just the investment and the startup costs, but also the future generations of revenue as well. Kind of touched on some of these with the ownership or the owner kind of investments of time. I want to make sure that we kind of touched on some of this as well. What are the customers willing? And after we finish up with some of these slides, I want to kind of dive into some more specific questions to each of you. But what are the customers willing to pay? How much? How will they pay? Whether it's going to be subscription, whether it's going to be online, whether it's getting something that is recurring payment. What kind of revenue are you generating? Is it going to be that one time, or is it going to be recurring? And then solicit feedback either through your peer groups. I know there's like some FSU has some polling options out there as well. Is that right, Caitlin? Maybe not.
Poll?
Yeah, surveys.
Qualtrics,
Yeah,
yes.
there we go. That's what, yeah. So you can get some either fail fast testing to where you can say, okay, am I heading in the right direction? Is this even worthwhile to have this kind of a price point? Or can I immediately find out that no, that's a horrible idea. Maybe I need to rethink this. So that right now, you all are very in deep. I know a lot of you mentioned that you have business partners as well, but all three of you are deep in the weeds right now. Sometimes it's helpful to get some feedback from people that aren't as engrossed and invested in what you're doing, just to kind of help you make sure that you're kind of staying within the guardrails of reasonability for some of the things like, for instance, price points and how you sell things to end customers.
There's 4 people now, just an FYI. Somebody else joined.
Oh, okay. Who's the fourth person?
Isabella.
Oh, there we go. Just so I don't ignore her, Isabella, do you want to just briefly, obviously your name is Isabella, but what tell me a little bit about your business? Just a tweet version.
Yes, I'm working with Mariana, who is also in this Zoom meeting. Essentially, we are Mask Flask Bags. It's a product line of everyday bags that have a secret compartment for alcohol so that we can smuggle alcohol whenever we would like.
Nice.
You just, yeah, I like that. Mariana, I don't think I gleaned that point from her introduction, but that's very relevant to, for instance, like football games and things, I imagine, or really anything, I imagine. So that's interesting. Well, in that vein, this is a good, and really for all of you, given that I know whether again you're selling something online or you're selling something direct to the consumer through Market Wednesdays, things like that. I imagine you'll be setting up shop once you have this product created. It is helpful to know what your break-even point is. And I think I mentioned there's, oh shoot, I thought I had a slide on here with the actual break-even formula. There we go. Where this is somewhat of an exercise that is a malleable exercise that can change as you determine what your actual cost price points are. But this graph right here that you see is essentially a point where you can look at, you can estimate, and no estimate is perfect, but you can estimate what you think your fixed costs are going to be at any given point in time. So if you know that you have to rent space, if you know that you need a laptop, if you know that you need insurance for what you're selling, if you know that you have any subscriptions for a website that are a certain price point per month, all of your costs that aren't going to change whether you sell 1 or 100 products. And then if you look at how much and price out how much it costs to make one product, and obviously things change at scale. To buy the materials for one bag or one baby product or whatnot is going to depend on whether you're selling. It's going to be a lot more efficient to buy 10,000 pieces of material compared to just one. But for the purposes of again, just kind of mapping out where you think some of these benchmark points can be, you can just estimate at what a reasonable purchase order of a given product might be, and then what other costs are associated with getting that product ready to sell. And then this formula right here, all of your fixed costs divided by basically the profit, the gross profit of what your selling point is, price point is, minus the combination of the variable costs that go into that one product. That formula right there allows you to see where that intersection is, and that's your break-even point. You know that if you sell, let's just say that's 50 units right there, 50 bags in this case for two of you that are on the call, you will know that after that 50 point benchmark, that everything beyond that is you're just increasing your actual profits. So you're still incurring costs, but you've already surpassed covering your fixed costs, and now you're actually covering, and you're obviously going to be covering, if you set your price point at an ideal level, you're not only covering your variable costs, but you're actually covering your fixed costs as well. You've already passed that, and you're actually moving on to actually making profit. And so knowing what your break-even point is helpful when it comes to conversations, to know what your at what points can you predict that you can surplus enough profits to maybe be able to expand, because some of these fixed costs might have capacity constraints. If you only have one office or warehouse where you're making these products or housing these products and then sell and ship elsewhere, you can only sell so much in a given period of time out of that fixed capacity that you have. So that might be a point to where you can say, okay, for this 2-year period of time, we're going to have our break-even point will be X amount number of units. We can then that'll allow us to generate profits of an amount to where then we can expand. Our break-even model changes because we have different fixed costs, but it'll allow us to then have a capacity where in year 4, we only have to sell 40 units before we break even, or let's say 60 units before we break even because of our higher fixed costs, but then our profit just skyrockets from there as we continue to sell more products. Talk about like a drinking game. I feel like if I had counted how many times I said products right now, that would have been we would all be lost right now. So I think I kind of just like blew through some of these slides. Let me include this one right here. And then we'll get to any other questions and maybe kind of drill down into some of these. I want to kind of know where some of you all are right now. But when you include some kind of a pro forma financial, you've probably heard that term before. You're going to want to have that reflect your best estimate of what your future results are going to be. Now, your future results, that can be based on whatever period of time that you feel is appropriate to convey to your audience the message you're trying to get across. There is no one bright line set of financials that you're going to be able to show. It's whatever is best able to paint the appropriate picture. If you show financial predictions for 1 year, or maybe a 1, 2, and 3 year period, or maybe depending on what your business is, maybe it's just 12 months. I want to show you what my projection is going to be for the next 12 months, and that's going to itself be so impressive that that's all I need to focus on. But in general, most people usually include at least like a 1, 2, 3 or 1, 3, 5 benchmark to be able to estimate out what your financials are. The hardest part of that is going to be the first iteration of it. Year 1, month 1 is going to be the hardest one to tackle, because that's where you're really doing most of your research in terms of what your price points can be based on what your customers have the capacity to pay. Not even just capacity, but what's the market like. If they can get something comparable on Amazon for a lesser price, then there's a high chance that they will, right? So what is your price point going to be given all the variables in there? What are the costs based on your research and maybe already experience so far? What would that cost look like as you start to scale? And then what are your other expenses that we touched on? Expenses that maybe you didn't even know that you're going to incur, such as insurance, utilities, if you have some kind of a operation. If you're working even out of your house, I see a few people that appear to be at home. You're almost, you are, without you knowing it, or actively, you are contributing and carrying costs, operational costs of the business, just because you're not using business utilities right now and business internet. You're kind of milking off of the internet of your personal household and everything. In a real world, if you were to look at this a year, 2, 3 years down the road, if you were to have an office space somewhere, those are expenses that you would all of a sudden now have to cover as an operational expense that you otherwise, when you were kind of in the startup mode, you were able to avoid having to pay because you're able to absorb them through your personal kind of setup and everything. So in general, and again, the presentation of how the financials look is something that can vary depending on, again, what's the best reflection of in a finite amount of time, because the presentations are short. You're only going to want the seconds that you spend on the financials to be the seconds that provide the most impact. Anything else or some other things can come out during some of the Q&A. But when you're talking about the financials, you're going to want to have done all the work, right? But you're not going to want to bore people. As much as I love financials and accounting, you're not going to want to bore people with every single line item. You're going to want to have that in your back pocket and in your head, but you're going to want to mostly focus on, in my opinion, the revenue and growth percentage. So how much you're going to be able to hit and estimate that you're going to be able to bring in at certain benchmark moments, the growth rate of that revenue, the cost of sales, and the gross profit percentage, which is the revenue minus cost of goods sales, to be able to show how that's going to be able to scale as well. And then overall, what your operational expenses are after you've thought through what all those might entail. And then really the final product of all of that is, you've probably heard of this term before or read it before, but EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, which is, from an investor standpoint or from a banking standpoint, it is the true operational profits of the company. So your revenue minus the cost to get that revenue, minus, so the actual cost of goods sold, and then minus all the other operational expenses. Depreciation is kind of ancillary. Interest is ancillary if you're a bank, because you're looking at what the actual ability to pay is. And then taxes are just a byproduct of having profits. So at that point, taxes are just the cost of doing business. And so having some of those numbers would be what I would focus on as kind of your North Stars when it comes to developing your financials, and the meaningfulness that you can then glean from those financials to use in your presentation. But then that you can only get to this result right here after you've done all the legwork that we just kind of talked through. But I just kind of like powered through a lot of that right now. Do we have? But I also know I'm trying to be mindful of the kind of the time constraints here. Yeah, if someone has any questions, please message it or raise your hand, and Caitlin can.
So what I'll do, because with the sound thing, we just can't talk at the same time, we being classroom here and you guys at home. So I'm gonna unmute and we're not gonna say anything here. And then if somebody has a question, go for it.
I'm sorry, you said not to say anything.
Does anybody have a question?
It's
It's okay if you don't have a question.
Well, I can continue to evangelize for like few more minutes. Just really quickly.
Yeah.
So as someone that has been a judge in some of these competitions, I naturally focus on the financials, but frankly, all the judges do, even the people that have no background in accounting or finance. They're a judge because they're successful as entrepreneurs themselves, and they've learned from their experiences. They've bumped into walls, ran into issues, made mistakes, and they will be able to identify any areas that for instance, potential costs that if you haven't at least thought of to be able to have some kind of response to, it's going to, again, when we're talking about the seconds of a presentation that make up the minutes that limited minutes that you have, you're going to want to at least have thought through some things, even if they're not included in your financials, to be able to have a proper response to a question. And so if you're going to have numbers as part of, if you don't have numbers in your presentation at all, that's going to be very noticeable. If you do have numbers in your presentation, which you're going to want to have as part of the kind of tent poles of your pitch, If you do have numbers, you're gonna wanna know how you got those numbers, understand the methods and reasonings behind how you're reflecting the scale of the company, and then be able to cite some of those when people, if they do ask, when they do ask. And if your revenue model is something else to maybe consider, if your revenue model or your overall profitability is on either extreme of reasonableness, you might want to workshop that a little bit more. You might want to have talk to someone, talk to myself, talk to other Jim Moran advisors. Because if your revenue is showing that by year 3 you're going to make $10 billion, that's going to be a question. Like, well, how'd you arrive at that? You know, how in the world do you think you're going to be a billionaire in year 3 from this? Likewise, if your revenue model shows that you're going to lose $100,000, you need to think through that a little bit more. That's going to obviously raise some questions. And so I would start with the first step of, again, looking at what your revenue sources are going to be. What are the different streams of revenue that you can tap into given your business model? What are the costs to get there, not just operationally, but to actually sell or bring in a given dollar from those various revenue streams. And again, you might have 2 or 3 combined as part of your overall business. And then what do those numbers look like from an overall performance standpoint and metric standpoint, growth percentage, gross profit, revenue after cost of goods sold, and then EBITDA and overall performance profitability. What do those numbers look like as you fill in some of those pieces of the financial puzzle? And that will at least allow you to be at some points where you can kind of manipulate some of those things. I mean, for instance, the break-even point. If your break-even point is too far down the road, kind of to make operational sense, well, if you change one of these, if you change one of these pieces right here, price, that then changes the whole equation. Likewise, if you were able to cut down on your variable costs, that would as well. Same thing with fixed costs. So there are a lot of different ways to approach your financials to be able to best present them and best kind of pitch them. And the best place to start is just to get started with it and take it one step at a time. Ask a lot of questions. Even the smartest business owners that I know still openly admit they don't know everything. And so they're constantly asking questions, constantly trying to glean other information from people that have been there, done that before. And so I would, you have a great team here, and so I would not hesitate to reach out for advice on this. I'm happy to help however I can. And if anyone does have any questions, either now or after this, I think my information's on the website or something.
We can connect you.
Yeah, and so just let us know, and I'm hopeful to see everyone live next year. Are you doing it live? Yeah, live.
Are
next
you
year.
talking about for the actual?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's the plan.
Yeah, for the actual innovation challenge finals at least. Have we got a question?
Yes.
Yeah, hold on one second, let me unmute. Go for it.
Okay, so my question was about the break-even formula. For the price, are we doing the gross profit? So would that number include like some type of sales projection, how much we expect to make for that year?
So you were on a roll, and I.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
yeah, and thank you for clarifying that, because that could get you on a misleading tangent if not done properly. In this specific equation, it is done for, and I think for the most part, everyone on this call, this is appropriate for or applicable to, but this is for selling one thing. So if you are selling one, I'm just going to go with what I happen to keep remembering the most, one bag. What would you price that one bag for? Let's just say it's $50. What would you then have as the costs to make, direct costs to make that one bag? So that's paying someone to sew it or manipulate the bag in some way, paying for the bag to actually have the product in hand, paying for the whatever other materials or decorations that you put on to manipulate that bag, those are all the costs that go into making one item. And so when you mentioned gross profit, not to get like terminology focused, but like gross profit is sales price minus cost of goods sold. So in this case, you can almost think of it as that bottom line right here, price minus variable costs. That's essentially really gross profit of one unit. So your price minus all of your variable costs, and then your fixed cost is going to be for any given period of time. So let's just say a year, it's going to be overall that's going to result in how much do you need to sell in order to finally not only cover your variable costs, but at what point does your profitability from that cover your fixed costs as well. So it's not all sales proceeds minus all variable costs. It's sales price minus variable costs for one unit.
Thank you. That makes more sense.
And if at minimum it's food for thought, do you actually need to show this equation in your presentation? I would absolutely say no, you don't need to show it. But because again, that might not be the most valuable use of those seconds and those minutes to kind of have people focus on that. But it would be very helpful to know what it is so you can reference it, to be able to know that as you're pitching your revenue projections, to be able to say, by the time we sell 50 units, we've already hit our break-even point. And then we anticipate hitting that break-even point in month 3 by doing X, Y, and Z sales activities and marketing pushes and things like that. So it's helpful to be able to know, to be able to include in your presentation and know as the business owner. And I would then use your own discretion and kind of best judgment as to kind of how you want to deploy that.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Also, Mariana says, thank you so much. And I hope I pronounced your name right. Oh, she's off the call. Okay. Well, she did say thank you so much though.
Okay, good. Well, thank you all. Thank you. Oh, thank you everyone here.
Yeah. Bravo.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you all, and good luck, and I hope to see everyone here. I hope to see you all next year.
And if anybody will connect you to David if you do have any questions. So reach out to either me or Wendy and we can do that. So thank you guys.